Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Trucker Talk Thursday with your host, Marcia Withers. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am so glad to see you in the house tonight. Well, thank you all as well for sharing the broadcast last week when we discussed some solutions for breast cancer and how important it is to connect to your ministers at your church, your pastors, to get prayer and to help you push you through as you go through these various challenges with breast cancer or any form of cancer. So, thank you so much for sharing and watching the broadcast last week. This month, we're discussing Alzheimer and Dementia Awareness Month. This subject is so dear to me because of my father, Jessie Withers, who was a former truck driver as well as he suffered from Alzheimer's and disease. I wouldn't say, well, yeah, I could say he suffered a little bit from Alzheimer's and dementia. And so, if you know anybody in the trucking community that has friends, families, or you may think that you may be going through early Alzheimer's, dementia, certainly watch the broadcast, share the broadcast. This is a subject that affects millions of people in various ways. So, we have a special guest speaker, an expert that's going to talk about dementia, signs to look for. We're going to provide some solutions for the caregivers, even for the person that is going through dementia as well, and some of the stages to look for. And then also how to plan. Planning is going to be very, very important as you go through these various stages of Alzheimer's, dementia, Alzheimer's. So, let me tell you something. This month, I'm dedicating this whole month to my father. I learned so many things from my dad, from driving a truck to operating a business, as well as now taking care of my dad, being the caretaker, and learning how to work on vehicles. There was so many things that I learned from my dad. And so I'm going to take this time this month to dedicate it to my father. So these next few episodes is going to be in memory of my dad, Jessie Withers. As you can see, his picture is posted on the screen. If you know anyone that is going through Alzheimer's, please, again, share the information and sit back and enjoy the show. All right. So let me tell you about my dad. My dad is an interesting man, was an interesting man. He was involved in so many different type of activities. Not so much of a sports person. He will watch sports, but mostly involved with the recreational sports like motorcycle racing and drag racing and, driving his truck, his semi. And so, in the process of his life, his handle was Evil Knievel because my father had so many different accidents and lived to tell the story. Well, I am telling this side of the story. So, when I was younger, he had a motorcycle, he had two motorcycle accidents, and he had another accident in his semi to where it was a dump truck and he slid and went over the embankment in Wichita and went to the canal face first. And he amazingly he got out of the vehicle with some broken ribs, some bruises and cuts on his face and on the back of his head. And he went to get help. And for him at this time, he wasn't concerned about himself. He was more concerned about the person's vehicle, the person's dump truck that he was driving. And so it's just amazing how you're almost, broke up, but you're thinking about somebody else's property more so than you are your life. Anyhow, he went to the hospital, got taken care of, and you just don't know what's going on because of the trauma to the brain, right? So this last major accident that really tilted for my dad was an accident to where someone was driving a van, a metavan, and hit my dad head on. Both of them doing about 70 miles an hour and had this traumatic crash. Well, the gentleman didn't have his seatbelt on and he went through the windshield and landed on my dad's truck. Well, you already know that there's pieces still on the truck of his body. So when my dad go back to review the truck, see what's going on, and get some of his contents out of the truck, that's when in his mind it shifted because now the reality is sitting in that this person is deceased. And so he is stating that I killed a man. And I would say, no, Daddy, you didn't kill anybody. You know, he fell asleep head on and he didn't have his seatbelt on. That's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. So at this time, he's, going to work after, he gets the truck replaced and bought another truck. And he's going to work and he's starting not to remember certain things that was every day for him, everyday routines. He's starting to forget. And so it was one time, a couple of times, where he's supposed to pick up his niece from school or work, and he never got there. And so we started noticing these different patterns, but no one said anything. No one said, well, Jessie, I think you need to go to the doctor, or I think you need to see somebody regarding your memory, or you're forgetting these small things that you do on a normal basis. So one day, the last thing that really took place that caused me to put pause on, and my dad, we would have these conversations, and in the conversations he was like, and my dad called me Ann, Marsha Ann, and he said, I'm noticing. Well, he called me something else, but I'm not gonna tell y'all my nickname. So I'm gonna just say Marsha Ann for the purposes of this broadcast. Okay. So he said, Marsha Ann, he said, I'm noticing that I'm forgetting things, or um, I'm noticing a change in me that I really don't like. And I said, okay. And so we talk about these different things. And I said, well, he said, if anything ever happens to me, I want to come and live with you. Okay, that's not a problem. Now, in the process of this, he's still driving, but we're still having these conversations. Now, at this time, I'm young. I'm probably like 25 years old when this is going on. And my dad has his last accident to where he runs into the back of another car, and it was no major damage done, but it brought caution to us because he gave four different answers to this accident. He gave the police one story, the insurance one story, he gave myself one story. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, he does not remember what happened or how it happened. And I cannot afford my dad to be on the road and he's driving this semi with all these people driving and have another accident that could cause more harm than good. So we sold the trucks, and now here we are. My dad is living with me, and he is no problem. He is pretty much a routine kind of guy. He gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's off to do his job. Right. Well, now he's not working. So he gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning, puts on his shoes, and trying to leave the house. Well, where are you going? You can't go anywhere. You're not working. You're retired. Oh, okay. So he takes his shoes off and get back in the bed. And so this was going on for a period of time. And so we start setting up doctor's appointments. Go to the doctors, can't find anything wrong with him. Everything is okay. Blood work is okay. Healthy, no issues at all. So I decided to go ahead and get my dad a life insurance policy, and I'm the beneficiary. I'm paying for it, but it's in his name. Okay, and so we're continue going on now. He's getting up early, and it's interfering with my day to day, right? So I said, okay, well, look, I'm gonna get a gym membership. We're gonna go to the gym, and then we're gonna burn this energy off so you can go to sleep and you can sleep all night long. Guess what? He still got up at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I am struggling. Do you hear me when I tell you? I am struggling because I worked out with him in the gym and I'm tired. But for him, routine, get up, get up, get up. So this has gone on for some time. So then we go back to the doctors, and it's like, okay, this is I need some help because I need him to sleep. So they try different sleep aids. Now at this time he has not been diagnosed with having dementia. So we're just trying to find out what is actually going on. And one day my dad leaves the house. Now I can tell you I've experienced several different emotions. I experienced frustration, anger, um, scared, almost abuse, right? Different things that has gone on. And so this particular day, my dad decides to leave the house. So I come home from work. Everybody's coming in the house, from their day, trying to figure out, what we're going to do, yada, yada, yada. And my dad is not at home. So we're like, okay, where is he? We go on a community search for my dad. My father is not familiar at all with Maryland. He was pretty much born and raised in Wichita, Kansas. Not familiar with the area that we lived in, didn't know the name of the street, didn't know the house number, didn't know anything. And my father is missing. I'm running through the neighborhood, walking through the neighborhood, calling my daddy's name, looking for my daddy, going blocks over and blocks over, and my dad is nowhere to be found. So we're coming back together, right? And so we're like, okay, we got to find a different strategy, right? And so there are some wooded areas in the community that I lived in. There were some wooded areas. And so it's like, okay, we're going to have to go through the woods and look for your dad, right? And so in this area, you have a housing development, and then several blocks down, you have which was one point in time a mental hospital community, right, with abandoned buildings. So what do? I'm going through all kinds of emotions. I can't call the police because it hasn't been 24 hours that my dad was missing. So I'm like frantic because how do I explain this to my family? How do I explain this to my daddy's sisters, right? That I lost my daddy. So I'm walking down the street and my dad is coming out of this man's house with a beer in his hand. And he just laughing and joking, and they're talking about his car. He had a at this time he had like a 1950 or 1952 Chevy pickup, I think, in the driveway. And so they're talking about these race cars. They're having this full conversation. And I think to myself, oh my God, he was in this man's house. And I thought to myself, Why would you bring a total stranger in your house? Right. But when you're meeting somebody of kindred, because they have a lot of things in common, it didn't even cross his mind that he didn't know my dad, because of the conversation that they had. And they had this conversation for a while. And or these conversations regarding, racing cars, working on cars, and, just everything, right? So my dad, and I talked to the gentleman. I was like, my dad has dementia, Alzheimer's. He was like, oh, I didn't know. And he wouldn't have known. And so I bring my dad back home, and I'm like, okay, we got to find another solution so that, he's in the house, and that when we get home that we go out and we do other things. And so that was my only scare as far as losing my dad or not being able to find my dad. Other than that, I was able to really keep track of where my dad was and what was going on. So another incident was when I'm pregnant at this time with my son, and my dad wanted to leave the house. Well, he couldn't leave the house, or I wouldn't let him leave because he didn't know where he was going, and he was agitated. Now, during this time, before this took place, I was able to find an adult daycare center for my dad. So they would come pick him up on a bus. He have his lunchbox, and he'll go. And there was other people in this center that had some had Alzheimer's, dementia. Some of them did not. Some of them was, this is just their regular activity, community center that they go and they hang out for the day while their children are at work and they don't want to be home alone. And always excited for the bus to come. Now, let me tell you guys, and when Miss Jackie Lindsay gets on here, we're going to discuss these adult child care, adult daycare centers. These centers are not cheap. These centers cost almost as if you had a newborn, if not more. And some plans, you have a couple of days a week that your parent or your loved one can come in and have fun and relax and do community activities. And then sometimes, if your money is not as long, then you have other activities at home to keep their minds going to where they're not just gone. You want to keep them activities with games and keep their cognitive skills going, right? All right. So my dad, he thought that it was at nighttime. He thought that he was leaving, and so my son's father comes home. No, he don't come home because we're not living together. He comes to the house to check on me and the baby. Well, my dad is agitated because he can't leave. And since he can't leave, he feels like he's going to force me to let him out the house. Now, when my dad went to the other end of the house and ran to charge me at the door to attack me, Kenny grabbed my dad, right? I've never been in a domestic violence situation, but this is the first time that I understood how a woman in a domestic violence situation felt when the abuser has lost control by somebody else. Okay. And I'm going to break this down. So my dad charges at me at the door. He does not get to me before Kenny gets my dad and he hems him up. Right. Now I'm looking at my dad, and my dad is a little man, but he's very, very strong. I didn't realize how strong my dad was. And so my dad picked him up and carried him on his back up the stairs. And so Kenny's letting me know I'm going to have to put your father down. And I'm like, don't hurt him. I'm frantic. I'm like, don't hurt my daddy. I don't care. Let him go. I don't care. Let him go. And so he was like, I can't let him go because if I let him go, he's going to hurt you. And I was like, I don't care. And at the time, I can laugh at it now, but at the time when I was going through it, I was like, I didn't want my daddy hurt. So the police is being called because my dad needs it. We need more intervention for my dad. So, excuse me. So my dad is called. Excuse me. The police is called. Kenny has my dad pent up like this. Now it's time to use pressure points because my dad is not backing down, and he's still lifting Kenny up these stairs. So Kenny put the pressure points on my dad. My dad breaks down. And then here comes the police, right? So my dad, he's not fussing with the police. He was like, I don't know her. I was like, hold on. He's like, this is your daughter. No, that's not my daughter. And that was the first time that my dad didn't recognize who I was. And he thought I was a completely different person than who I was. And so they took him to the hospital. And so from the hospital, they said, well, he is saying that you're trying to kill him or trying to hurt him. And so now at this point was the first time that intervention truly set in for my dad. Other doctor's appointments that we gone to previously would give him a bill of health that there was nothing wrong with him. Now we had an MR and a CAT scan done previously. Now after this has taken place, they're doing another CAT scan. And so we start seeing the shrinkage of his brain. So because of the trauma and him having this accident and these multiple accidents that had brain injury, he went into early dementia. And in that process of early dementia, now we can identify what it is. We have a name to it. And so as I'm going on with my pregnancy, I'm at a high risk pregnancy and I can't care for my dad the way that I want to care for my dad. And we had to put him into a nursing home facility. Now, in the process of this nursing home facility, now my mom comes in, and so she is now the caretaker for my dad since I'm at a high risk, and I can't do those things for my dad. Now, my dad is in the nursing home. My mom now is taking care of my dad. And I just thank God that they had that kind of relationship, or they squashed out everything, during the divorce and family issues, so that there was no hardness in her heart towards my dad, that she could care for him as if I would care for him. Okay, this is important to really take note of. And as my dad is going through the nursing home, he's a man. There's women there. There's, they still have hormones. They still have emotions. They still have yada, yada. Right. And so there was an incident, in the nursing home where my dad was having what he thought was consensual. And I'm not sure if it was consensual because I wasn't there. But, there was an altercation to where my dad had damaged somebody's collarbone, one of the security people's collarbone, when they were trying to remove the two couples, right? And so then they had to medicate my dad even more because of the hostility or the anger or the rage that my dad had. Now, during this time, after my son is born, I'm going in and see my dad. And one thing I can honestly say is that I do thank God for this. Out of my siblings, my son was the only child that my dad has ever physically held and seen eye to eye. And I was grateful for that before he really transitioned into not being able to walk or talk. And I must say that when you place your loved one in a nursing home, and we're going to talk about this in the planning stages, if you do not already have a life insurance policy for your loved one in your name and you are the beneficiary, do that now before they're diagnosed. Okay. If you ever have to put your parent into a nursing home environment like I did, the nursing home will liquidate all assets of that individual to care for them in that particular stay, even their life insurance policy. And since the life insurance policy was in my name with his name on it, but I was the beneficiary, they couldn't touch that life insurance policy. So when my dad did decide to transition over, there was money to cover those burial expenses. Okay. Now, depending on what state that you're in, you have to find out the rules and regulations to your state, but always make sure that you have a will, a living will, right? So your parent can give you the information they would like to see happen to them with the living will. Okay. That's going to be really, really important to have. And so now as my dad is in this nursing home environment, I'm telling you, I'm in Baltimore. Now I live in the county of Baltimore, but my daddy was in the city of Baltimore. And I'm gonna tell you, my father was in the hood of Baltimore City. And when my father died, he had not one bed sore on his body, and he was not able to walk or talk for 5 years. If you decide to put your parent into a nursing home, choose the right nursing home for your loved one. This particular facility was a nursing home slash rehabilitation center. So although my father could not walk or talk, his roommate was fully active, right? And this was a nursing home environment for him. He was able to tell me if anything was to ever happen to my dad. That's one thing that we always have to be mindful of. Go in, check on your loved one, see how they're doing, see how the staff is, get to know the staff. When you have planning meetings, go to the planning meetings, be active, stay active while you're there. And even while you're there, interact with some of the other people staying in the nursing home. Because guess what? The more you're in active, when you're active with them, they will engage with you and they'll let you know what their staff members are doing. If it's not to them, it's to somebody else, and you can keep an eye out on it. But when you just go in and you just care and just see your loved one and leave and have a disregard for anybody else, be mindful. Be mindful because they don't have people to come in and see them. They don't. Sometimes they just leave them there and just gone because they don't want that responsibility or, they don't want to deal with this particular issue. And they just feel like, look, it's a nursing home. The state is taking care of it or whoever is taking care of it. And they just go about their business. Let me tell you guys, when you have a loved one in a nursing home environment, go to the nursing home a couple of times a week, once a week. Cut your love. I cut my dad's hair. Let me tell you, my dad had his own barber come in and cut his hair. Oh, I wasn't playing, y'all. He had his own barber. He had manicure, pedicure, whatever he needed, he had, and my father couldn't walk or talk. Okay. But just because he's in that state does not mean he has to look like he's in that state. And it was so important for my son. My son had conversations with my dad, and it was interesting because they bonded. You know, my son would cut my dad's hair, right? Even though he was younger, he was just a baby. But my son would participate in the care. He would participate in feeding my dad, his grandfather, right? If we went outside, he would push him outside and touch him. Just really had that intimate moments with my dad, even though he wasn't able to talk to him. But they still had that type of connection, right? He knew that he was in the room. My dad knew I was in the room. The smile, just different things that we can't take for granted. All right. So look, it is 6:32. But I just wanted to share my story with you all and to see how important this is to me. That we really take on the information that we need, because you know what, we're not alone as caregivers. I was talking to a potential client yesterday who is just now getting into the transportation industry. They just bought a truck, and she has a full-time job, and then she also works from home, and she cares for her mom who has dementia. And we had a great conversation, and even laughed a few times. It's important to really take the time to connect and to share, and never think that you're alone in this process. You're going to go through several emotions. That's what we do. Why me? Why come somebody else? But you're the best person for the job. If you're the caregiver for a family member, a spouse, significant other that's going through Alzheimer's, you're the best person for the job. All right, you all. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. I will see you next Thursday with Miss Jackie Lindsay as we talk about some more information on Alzheimer's awareness. I appreciate you all. If you need dispatch services, you can always give us a call at 800-404-2554, extension 703. And we'll make sure that we connect you with someone that can be your dispatch agent. If you would like to know more information about Extraordinary Logistics Solutions or Trucker Talk Thursday, please visit our website at xlsolutions.biz. All right, you all, I look forward to seeing you next week. Share the broadcast, like the broadcast, and you're never alone. Until next time, you all, have a great day.